So, welcome to our regular Thursday slot of discussion. Really pleased that you can join us. My name's Yoni Ejo, and I'm a social worker and I'm an adopter, and I'm also an adopted person. And I'm really interested in sort of providing information and training to adopters and foster carers to make them more confident and hopefully make their lives easier. And my colleague joining me is Keely, and I'll leave her to introduce herself.
Hi folks, nice to see you again if you've been tuning in regularly, and hello if this is your first time. I'm Keely. I am a child therapist and I've been doing that for nearly 14 years. I've recently just branched out into working with women who are struggling during pregnancy or through the postnatal period. But really the core of my work has been working with children. And a lot of that work has been with children who have found themselves in the looked after and accommodated in some way or another, be that through kinship care or foster care, or in a with an adoptive family. So it's great to be able to work with Yoni and just to kind of share our kind of passion in supporting these children and also their carers as well.
Absolutely. And what would be great is when you come in, if you can just put a comment saying maybe the A for you're an adopter and F for a foster carer, just to give us a little bit of a sense of who's here, and including if you're watching on the replay, just put a hashtag replay and A or F would be amazing, so that we can make sure that we're getting the right sort of tone and information for you. And also, if you are going to comment, do remember to click permission to StreamYard to show your names, because otherwise it just says Facebook user, and it's much better for us to know who's commenting. It's lovely if you can engage with us. So today we're talking about adoptive and foster carers, adoptive parents and foster carers' experience of parenting and being parented themselves, and how that impacts on their own style of parenting. And I think it's very much a subject, I guess, close to my heart. My experiences within adoption was that I did sort of become impacted to some extent around attachment and being perhaps quite a insular sort of child, which maybe was influenced by my parents. And I know that's something I've had to battle with as a parent. So yeah, really welcome the conversation, Keely, with you about that.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. And I think it's something that often doesn't get talked about, actually. So last week we were looking at attachment, but in the context of children and how those attachments are formed and how they might play out and what a child would need. But I really wanted to kind of look today about how our own experiences of being parented then kind of impact on how we then parent when we have care of children. So as we said last week, our attachment style is formed in those very kind of early years, probably by the time a child is 3, they say really the attachment style is set. Though, as we discussed last week, that can be changed. It takes effort, but it can be changed. But it really sets a blueprint for how we perceive ourselves and ourselves in relation to others, how we interact with others, and what our expectations of others are. As well, and that kind of just runs throughout our life. And as we said last week, those attachment behaviours can be triggered during stress. So as adults, we'll find ourselves being triggered in friendships, in intimate relationships, work relationships, everyday interactions, managing the drive to work, talking to someone in a call centre, all those kind of
Yeah.
things, they do actually activate how we kind of respond in those times of stress, and they also kind of impact on how we form and, if we can, maintain relationships as well. And when we become parents, we have our own attachment styles that we kind of bring to that. We also have the ways that we've been parented and the culture that we've been parented in. They all come to the fore. So one kind of like idea that was certainly around when I was being parented, not just in my own family, it's something that kind of runs quite strongly, I think, in a lot of kind of culture in the UK. It's not quite run out yet. Is that idea that children must be toughened up, that you mustn't spoil them, and to spoil it, what people mean by not spoiling someone is not going and responding to the baby or the child when they're crying or they need something. Let's not go too heavy on the hugs, that kind of thing,
Right.
because the children need to know how to kind of sort themselves out, and they've got to be tough. And what all really means is that, a lot of people have kind of grown up kind of not kind of valuing their own emotions or feeling that they can really express them, that they've just kind of, when they're struggling, they just squash that down, because we're just meant to be tough and just to kind of get on with it. And that then also kind of maybe like translates into parenting too, because then, you've been parented like that, then how do you kind of then, that can pop up in the way you parent too, or it might not. So an excellent piece of work was done by a man called John Burnham, a family therapist, and he talks about scripts in a family. So every family has a script, and people play the different kind of parts in that, and there's so everyone has like their own kind of roles, but there's certain scripts in there, things that are said or are done by a parent or within the family system, that keep being repeated and kind of become kind of like part of your family's culture and way of being. So the first things are called replicative scripts, and you might find yourself repeating stuff or doing things that your parents or caregivers did to you that you didn't like, but you find yourself doing them again. And some people are not very aware of that. Maybe they like it, maybe they don't see any kind of harm or any kind of problem with that, and so they're just kind of repeat, and sometimes these things are God, it's not always at the negative, but sometimes we kind of look and think, actually, I didn't like the way I was parented, or the way my family's approach was to food or something. Like we weren't allowed to, you weren't allowed to leave the table until your plate was clean, even if you didn't like the food. It might be something like that. So you kind of then come in with a corrective script and say, actually, when I've got children myself, I'm not going to make food an area of control. I'm not going to put any kind of punishment around it, or equally any kind of like reward either, but I'm just going to kind of be quite relaxed in that area. That might be somewhere where you take a corrective script. So they're consciously changing areas of parenting that you didn't like when you were parented. If you've got a small child, you might not want to let them cry at night, you might want to kind of go back in and settle them, things like that. Where we kind of like different kind of like corrective scripts. So I guess, maybe just now for a few moments, just to kind of think about that and just to kind of reflect. I mean, ideas might have been popping into your head already about thinking about how you were parenting and what worked well and what you would have liked to have changed in your own parenting style. And if you're aware of it, what activates you with your own children, or if you've not yet got children living with you, what you think might potentially activate you when you are caring for children. And just having a time to kind of do that if you've not done it already, I think can be really useful, just to kind of think, actually, I didn't like that bit. Sometimes it's small things, like, for example, I used to hate it when my mum licked a tissue and then wiped my face.
Oh, yeah.
And I do
Yeah.
to my children or any other child I cared for. But other times it's just doing things like, you know, thinking about like what your nighttime routine would be like, you know, how emotional, how affectionate am I going to be? You know, I'm going to make sure that I tell my children, I don't know how many times a day that I love them. You know, I've all been like, you know, correcting things that I wanted to do. Not that my parents were very, you know, cold parents, but it's just something that I just kind of felt was just really important. That I get my training as a therapist has really helped me with that idea too. But, you know, to kind of do things like that. But it's also to think about kind of what activates you, right? Because no one's perfect, right? And as a parent, let's say there's only so many deep breaths you can take in a day.
Yeah.
You know,
About 3.
we are humans at the end of the day. But what can be really helpful, I think, if you're finding yourself kind of like losing your kind of like calm more times than you'd really be wanting to today, is just kind of going back and thinking about what are those, when something happens, what is the hotspot? What is the trigger for me? So it might be simple things like it just gets too loud and you find that overwhelming. But it might be things like, you know, as a child, maybe, you know, you weren't like indulged in certain ways, and here you are now feeling like you're kind of giving that to your children, and it feels like it's being thrown back in your face. So it might be triggering feeling of resentment in you, or, you know, frustration. Actually, sometimes, you know, you're being active, it actually might feel none. It might be actually, I don't know how to respond to this because you've never had that kind of experience yourself. You know, you might find yourself not being patient. You might stuff might come up that makes you feel angry, and it's about kind of thinking in those moments when I'm feeling that. What is that about? Could that stem back to my own kind of experience of being parented, or, you know, cared for? You know, what was that in my family kind of culture, my community kind of culture, that's now kind of provoking this kind of feeling in me? Can be really helpful. So I'd say things like journaling, if you've got the time,
Okay.
to sit down and kind of write that out. Sometimes can be really helpful if you're finding it really problematic. Maybe kind of having taking some counselling sessions yourself can be really helpful. Just to kind of just try and clear that up and get some clarity on it. Then it won't kind of keep popping its head up. Which might maybe help you feel better. And in turn, that means that you kind of are more able to kind of give as a parent. So there's all those kind of things to think about how we were parented. But I would always think too, you know, this is a two-way street. So the children will always be projecting onto you as well. So remember, all your children are coming from very traumatic, very chaotic, you know, very difficult circumstances, and they're projecting all their stuff onto you, you know, and if they are, it's the oddest compliment actually, but it means that they feel kind of, you know, kind of safe enough, or at least safe enough to kind of test. Sometimes they're just trying to see where you're lying in the sand is like how far can they go, and and you will still love them, you will still show them care and affection and warmth. They're testing that. I don't know, but I think sometimes, you know, the children are projecting their stuff onto you because they don't know. Sometimes when we spoke about attachment last week, we were talking about how like that attachment behaviors, the way the kids act, actually kind of work quite well when they're with their families, you know, because it got what they needed. It's when it comes out of that context that it becomes problematic. So, you know, that to think about. But I would say when you think about your hotspots or what the kids are doing, and when you kind of feel a reaction to that, think about how you're feeling, and then kind of question: is this you? Is this like your stuff, or is it an indication of how your child feels? So if you just like start to feel really lousy, or like, I don't know, just like really down about yourself or something, you think, is that about me and my stuff, right? Or is it this my child telling me something about themselves, kind of giving me some of their kind of emotional content, and that can really kind
I'm
of help me kind of forward.
I'm thinking about some of the foster carers, particularly that I've worked with, who've had problems within the placement, and you can really see coming into that situation that some carers have not become emotionally entrenched in perceiving what that behaviour is saying about them, whereas some others are maybe taking that behaviour very personally and feeling, and it's triggering them in terms of their lack of confidence, perhaps, or the fact that they want a tidy house or whatever it is, which is then triggering, and it's that reaction that's causing the problem, because you could have two carers who have the same behaviour from each individual child and react very differently.
I certainly understand the want for a tidy house. That's maybe a trigger for me. What you actually kind of go to there is really interesting, because again, it's about, where have their kind of experiences of being parented kind of impacted on them. So I think, it still runs strong, this idea, that children are up to, in Glasgow, where I live, often it's called that they're at it, right? That means, that they're kind of consciously kind of choosing the behaviour and knowing, purposely trying to like manipulate you with the behaviour. And yet I'd kind of come from kind of understanding that actually a child's behaviour is the communication, and the kind of more kind of distress they feel, the more kind of challenging that behaviour can kind of feel to us. And I think that's it, isn't it? It's about the kind of, if you come from, that you've been kind of parented with that kind of mindset of like, you're just doing this to upset me or to manipulate me, you're doing this on purpose, consciously, with negative intention, parenting goes down a very different path than when a parent kind of thinks, right, this is really challenging. And, the children are going to project some really difficult stuff onto you because they've experienced some really difficult, stuff themselves. So it's not going to feel nice sometimes. And the way they kind of display that in their behavior can be very complex, very challenging, hard to unpick sometimes. But it's about sitting with that feeling and remembering that that's what the children are doing. And then it's about trying to then step into that adult role and kind of think emotionally and respond kind of emotionally, and know that the children aren't doing it just because they're at it. Just,
right, just to wind you up, or
just for the devilment of it. So,
okay.
I think it's another term I use, just for the devilment.
Do you think
so I think it's a really,
do you think it's quite important for adopters and foster carers to find out as much as they can about the child's history and the way that they've been parented, to sort of put that in behaviour into context?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you'll only truly see it and feel it when the child is with you, to see how it actually translates on an everyday basis. But certainly, if you've got a good grasp of what their history was like, it gives you much more of a sense of like what their attachment style is likely to be, what difficult areas are going to be for them, and then how you kind of need to respond. So if they've kind of bounced from pillar to post, from family member to neighbour, to foster placement to foster placement, you know that they've had to live under Lord knows how many different set of house rules. Everyone's a bit different. Some probably felt safer than others. They faced a lot of rejection. So, then you have to be very nurturing, very consistent, very honest, trustworthy. So, those notes do give you good pointers in advance, definitely. And when you have the child, then you need to adapt that to that individual child too. So,
right, okay. And do you think there are particular things that carers can do when they are feeling triggered by behaviour? Because it does happen, with any parent, it happens, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, actually, I think one of your best starting points is actually to start like reparenting yourself. It's about kind of being kind to yourself, isn't it? Inside, we all have like little children, as they call it, in therapy, like that, the inner child. never goes away. There's always that
mm,
part of you. And it's maybe kind of going back and speaking, that sounds a bit fluffy, but kind of, acknowledging that kind of child and what kind of happened, and
mm,
what you like, what you didn't, and maybe give it some of the stuff, things that it didn't get at the time that maybe it should have. So it's about being kind to yourself,
mm,
and when you feel stronger in a better place yourself, then you're more able to kind of give, you've got more capacity to kind of give, and be a nurturing parent yourself. Is definitely one, one starting place, is just to kind of look at yourself, and then just to kind of think,
mm,
what are my hotspots when we keep getting into conflict about something? What is it that's kind of, bringing up these strong emotions in me? Why am I kind of like snapping
mm,
back, or just feel like unable just to kind of deal with that situation, and I'm walking out the room and just, I'm finding
mm.
it really challenging. Um,
One of the things that I feel quite strongly about, perhaps because of personal experience, is when you're in a relationship and you're parenting together, the different understanding and expectations of each of the partnership of each of you as a partnership, and perhaps having different perspectives because you've had very different parenting experiences
Mhm.
yourselves. Got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, that's about you as a couple coming together and having those maybe discussions. If you've not got children living with you currently, but you're planning to, having those kind of discussions together. Think about those scripts. What did you like about the way you were parented? What didn't you like? What would you like to do differently? Try and find some common ground. I mean, sometimes, to be honest, a little bit of difference, different kinds of styles sometimes can be helpful. But I think certainly kind of like
Okay.
having some kind of foundation, where you'd both agree, that we're both going to see behavior as a communication, not so we're going to be kind of nurturing in our
Mm,
response, things like that. Maybe if you're in preparation, reading the same books, or if one of you just read one good book, maybe the other reads it too, so you're kind of getting the same kind of idea. Can be really
mm,
useful. But I think sometimes though, like, just different personalities, is fine, isn't it? But I think having
mm,
similar kind of beliefs and kind of ways of parenting can be helpful. Um,
mm.
to kind of have that kind of shared understanding before you kind of go into parenting, or if you're there already, it's still not too late to have those conversations. You can still adapt.
Uh, yeah, I think if there's the biggest lesson for me is really having those conversations right at the beginning, um, even as part of the assessment. And I think they do talk about your history and experience of parenting, but not that it's always done individually. And there's not really a great conversation well, certainly in my experience, um, about, well, what does that mean? How are you going to negotiate those differences and those challenges? And I think that would have been really helpful
Mhm.
for us as parents, certainly my partner and I. What How do you think, are there sort of practical approaches that parents can, adoptive parents and foster carers can take in terms of sort of starting a conversation with their partner, do you think?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's just about maybe making some kind of time, just to kind
Mm,
of sit together and to be together and think about. Maybe you just have to go through almost like a list, like I guess we
mm,
have overarching themes, can't we? But it's like about, you know, what are your views like on education? Because often people kind of have very different kind of views on what they kind of want from that.
yeah.
What are your views on like sleeping time? Is it okay, to kind of, if they're upset in the middle of the night, are we gonna go, and settle them? or are we just gonna just kind of leave them just to kind of like, pop our head in the door, say that's it, go back to sleep, and pop back. You maybe need to take it down. What is our approach to food going to be like? Will we just kind of like all sit down together as a family? Are we going to accommodate making different meals for the children? Will we just put lots of bowls of food out on the table and they can just take what they want? It's just, I think, maybe kind of like, I guess just to kind of like really trying to strip it down a little bit, actually. So that when you're actually, you got the child with you're not like, oh, actually, how does that actually kind of translate to that everyday kind of day-to-day interaction? How are we going to kind of manage that? How will we manage the behaviour when, they're angry at us, or, I don't know, they throw a ball at you, or, they're like screaming rage or something. How will we manage that? Will we kind of like try and get them interested in our hobbies, or will we just let them kind of find their own way, strip it down and have those kind of conversations? Really think about it. I mean, I guess if you want to be really creative, you could even make like a bit of like a vision board or something, maybe like going through kind of magazines and stuff, sticking images down, or drawing if you're good at drawing, and kind of sticking that out and putting that down, and then having kind of conversations facilitated by that, why you chose those images, what it kind of makes you think for, how it expresses a certain hope, and how you'd like to parent.
Okay. No, that's really helpful. Really, thank you. I'm conscious of the time. We've got a couple of minutes, and it might be worth just having a little chat about our live challenge. Is that all right? We're doing a live challenge. We're hoping that people are really going to engage with this, and it's on the 2nd of February and the 4th of February, same time at 8 o'clock in the evening. And Keely, do you just want to say a little bit about what we're going to be doing on those 2 days?
Yeah, as if you've been following us for a while now, we've been talking a lot about play and how play can really help you to develop your relationship with your child. And our intention is to actually lead up to an 8-week course to kind of really give you all the skills and the knowledge of that. And the play challenge is really just a nice way just to start, just kind of just warming you up to thinking about play, kind of giving you some kind of experience of play with your children, engaging in certain activities around certain themes of play, and then kind of thinking, when you've done undertaken that piece of play, what was that like? Did it go well? What would I do differently? Would I do this again? So it's just trying to really kind of warm you up, just to kind of think about play and to start engaging in play in some of its many facets. And so in the play challenge, we'll be kind of supporting you through that, to as you kind of navigate play and just maybe try a few different ways of playing with your child or children.
Okay. And we were thinking that, it would be particularly useful for perhaps carers who are either new, or perhaps they've got a new child moved in with them, and perhaps the child is not quite gelling at the minute, or perhaps is feeling a little bit hard to reach. It'd be a really good opportunity to sort of build some strategies and some really good engagement in a relatively short amount of time. 20 minutes here and there invested through a week is really going to make a big difference. So really hope that you're going to join us. Both those challenges will be here in the Facebook group. So come and join with us and other foster carers and adopters, and hopefully have a bit of a play. So thank you, Keely. That's been really informative. Really enjoyed our conversation as always, and we'll put the information in the comments as well about the course, about the play challenge, so people can refer to it if you're coming in later on. So thank you for your time, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Bye-bye.